you find it is odious to us. You're punishing us. You have made us slaves. In fact, he is increasing it. And now, this is why we say that he does not publish revised estimates and doesn't publish according to our laws. You talked about, too, the motor vehicle tax.
Yeah.
What is that?
I'm not quite sure. Just going to... is it motor vehicle insurance?
No.
Circulation tax, right?
What is that? Under which category? Tax is supposed to be on an earning. You earn a salary, I come to take as a taxman. You earn a profit, I come to tax as a taxman. Right? You value add on goods, services, something. So a motor vehicle is an asset. Correct?
Yeah.
Am I earning on it? In fact, it's a depreciating asset.
Sure. You spend to operate it.
I spent to buy it. I spent to operate it. In fact, I think the quantum of taxation right up to operation, something like 16 taxes. Right? From purchase to operations. So it's my asset. And the thing is that when I go and insure it, I give it a value. Right? So I say my car is worth 1 million shillings. Insure it for that. So that's where they've gone. To say, you've given it a value, now we want to take from it. Isn't that a haircut? How is that different from taking your bank account? Yeah.
Say that again.
How different is it?
So I buy a car.
Yes.
And it's valued at, let's even say it's not me who has done it for 1 million. There's a qualified assessor who values it at 1 million shillings.
Yes.
And that's the amount that I'm going to insure it for.
Yes.
So the motor vehicle circulation tax is pegged on the value of that car, that
Absolutely.
1 million bob.
Absolutely.
And so it's taxing 2.5%
Yes.
of that.
Yes.
And you're saying that is a haircut.
Yes.
What's a haircut?
What are you earning?
What's a haircut?
A haircut is anywhere where the sovereign is made to cut their savings, their values, their assets to support a state.
Awesome.
So where we used to talk about a haircut on your bank accounts, like what happened in Ghana, where 30% of your deposits, whether they were in M-Pesa, whether they were in your bank accounts, right, were taken away. Here, they found a value in your vehicle, and they're taking away. Because this is not the principle of taxation. Taxation is on an earning. Your car is a depreciating asset. It's an asset. Earns you nothing. Earns you
If
nothing.
it's earning me, let tax on the earnings.
But what earnings?
On the upside.
You do on the earnings. But if it's a mode of transport, it's an asset. Right? And they get the asset value when you insure it. Because as you said, an assessor values it. Right? So they are coming for your asset. The last time there was such a tax was a hut tax that was brought by the British.
Yeah.
Right? That if you have a roof called a hut, you pay tax. That led, in fact, is one of the biggest instigators of the movement called Mau Mau. Because as you said, an assessor values it. Right? So they are coming for your asset. The last time there was such a tax was a hut tax that was brought by the British.
Yeah.
Right? That if you have a roof called a hut, you pay tax. That led, in fact, is one of the biggest instigators of the movement called Mau Mau. Right? Rebellion through and through, and it had to be cut. This is the same thing. They're coming for our assets. Why are they coming for our assets? It's a haircut. They're cutting what you have. And it's the first attempt.
But in this case, according to what you're saying, cutting from what you have in order to pay for something that you were not involved in.
Exactly.
Borrowing in the first place.
That is what is going on in this country. And I can assure you, we are not getting out of this as long as we have a delinquent regime in power. We are not getting out of it.
But how does this happen under the watch of everybody? The watch of all the players in the economy of this country, both in government and in non-government entities, political parties, financial watchers such as yourself and the others in Safina? How does it happen? How can we say that it has happened? For example, just looking at by the 30th of April, that there was a borrowing of 686 billion shillings domestically, 520 externally, and there was a repayment of loans of 1.3 trillion shillings, and all these expenditures of just 235 billion shillings on development budget, on development spending at the national government. How does this happen if it's outside of the law and nobody's noticing?
You know, I must laugh at that question, because we like to go into this belief that we still have a modicum of some institutions here. Yeah. I think if you're going to assess the last 11 years, I think that fallacy should be thrown in the garbage. Right?
We don't have institutions.
We don't have.
But do we have individuals?
How many times? We have individuals. I commend the COB. I commend the Auditor General. They write reports. They bring out all these. They take them to Parliament. What happens? They take them to EACC. What happens? Which institutions are you talking about? Yes. In fact, the only people now who can bring attention to this are the ones who are keeping the government afloat, who are loaning this government. IMF, World Bank. And I'm now starting to believe they must be complicit. Although I'm hearing murmurs.
But there's even more.
I'm hearing murmurs that they are now asking questions.
Who lends the government domestically?
Correct.
Retail.
And where is it?
Retail investors
yes.
are the biggest lenders.
Correct.
Retail is you and I, Jimmy.
We went through it. We went through it here. Here we are. Our money that we deposit in banks, right, goes towards treasury bills, loaning the government. And then they come back to us for taxation to pay it. And you cannot tell where that money went towards anything. It has never built a bridge here. It has never done anything. The other day, I saw the most ridiculous thing. And again, look at this. Parents' Eye just last week. They said the government has invested our housing levy money into government bonds. So here they take money from us, it becomes their money. Then they want to borrow their own money.
And pay interest.
And pay interest. So they come back to us for more taxation to pay interest
And
on what we already contributed as a levy. And even the media, the sad thing is, even the media did not get it. Some of the experts in the media were talking about absorption. So they're investing the money because there's no absorption to build housing. That's not the issue.
What's the issue, Jimmy?
Why? Where does it say they can borrow their own money? To do what? Who told them that they are supposed to invest and come back to us to pay that so-called profit in interest? Where does it say that? These are delinquents. This is where the issue is. These are criminals.
Are you saying it's
what
illegal?
You're talking about here is a criminal enterprise in this country.
It's illegal for the government to borrow that kind of money.
Absolutely. How? How does it borrow its own money?
It's illegal for the government to borrow from the fund.
No. It was not even from the fund.
It's earmarked.
No,
this one is
it was not a
fund.
Please take note. Please take note. In the last financial bill, they passed what was called a housing levy, which the court nullified as unconstitutional.
Yes.
The housing fund is yet now to start being cut.
To be operationalized.
That is housing levy money. That actually, I know there is a court case for the return of that money. Right? Because it should be returned. How are you investing it?
And if you borrow...
It's not even investment, by the way. Why are you borrowing your own money?
If you take that money, to pay it back into this fund, you'll need to pay it with interest.
Correct.
But
not fund. Don't call it a fund yet. Please. Levy. You can't move from levy to fund.
Levy.
That one was illegal. Right? It's nullified. You have to give it back to Mwananchi.
The interest to pay it, where will it come from?
You and I. But why is the government borrowing its own money? Why would you borrow your own money at an interest rate of 16%? And where, please tell me, where in law that is provided for. Please.
That's why I ask you, Jimmy.
That's the point I'm trying to make. That we have delinquents to our laws here. In as much as we can talk about the last 10 years, this current regime is done worse than the very worst that we had seen in the previous regimes in terms of breakage of law. And it has no business being where it is, because they are pure delinquents of the law. They have broken these laws of this country. Public finance management is part of our constitution. They have broken the laws, right? They have no business being in office. And I'm telling you, we are going to all stand up as Kenyans and run them out of town. We are not going to accept this continual pain. We are not. We are not. Out of pure illegalities. Illegalities. You perpetuate pain to us. We are not going to accept it. We are not.
Let's talk about it again in the next hour. Stay, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's do the news.
Thank you.
Stay. When you come, we'll look at this. So you're saying there are illegalities that have been perpetuated?
Absolutely and completely.
You'll show us.
Absolutely and completely.
The Appropriations Act of 2023.
Absolutely and completely.
What it approved.
Yes.
And then we look at the National Treasury, what it has spent and raised.
Yes.
And then you now point us to us and say, this is where the illegality is.
Kabisa.
Sawa.
Kabisa.
Tusiongee tu hapa mambo juju.
Kabisa.
From one side without figures from the other side.
Kabisa.
I want to see the law.
Kabisa. You want to see the law and you want to see the appropriations bill. Correct?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Hiyo nitakuonyesha sahi.
Kenya's biggest conversation is hosting Jimmy Wanjege. We're talking about debt, government expenditure and revenue. We're in the thick of the budget making cycle. How are we doing? 9 a.m. news time. Keep it here. We are on to the final hour of the Situation Room this morning. Jimmy Wanjege stays on, the party leader of Safina and the presidential hopeful for 2027, politician and businessman, budget and all. Before we went to the break, I asked you, so do you have with you the Appropriations Act 2023?
Yes.
And what it says? It's a voluminous document,
yes,
because it goes into item per item, each state department, each agency, each office, and how much has been allocated into it. And then there's a summarized version of it in terms of appendices.
Correct.
Okay. Take us through what we need to look at.
Now, if you look at Volume 1, it's called the Estimates of Development Expenditure. That's where you anchor debt. Remember, you can only borrow for development. So, in the anchor of development there, you have a schedule, right? The donor, as I've always said before, the donor is listed, right? This is procured before the budget, not after the budget, right? The sources of revenue, right, are gotten before the budget. So, here you have all the donors for the development expenditure, right? External loan funding. Summary of external loans funding. Can you see this? 2023-2024 budget. Okay? And you have the total, grand total at the end.
Summary of external loans budget. This is appendix what?
Appendix 1B.
1B. I'm looking at that. It's called a Summary of External Funding 2023-24 Budget, listed by a donor.
By donor, correct?
Okay.
So if you go to the last three columns, you have total loans, total grants, and then you go to the bottom. Total loans 272 or so.
Yeah.
And you have 42 grants.
Yeah.
And you have a grand total of entire external funding on loans and grants of 313 billion.
13 billion.
Right? This is June. This is the appropriations bill. This is what Parliament passed. It did not pass any other external loans, grants for any funding. But a month later, the National Treasury lists external loans and grants as 870 billion.
So one would assume that if it's listed, it's been approved by Parliament. But what we are saying is that it's very clear that what Parliament approved was 300 and some odd billion.
Yes.
a few weeks after that, the National Treasury lists that amount plus another 557 billion.
Correct.
So things are just being done as though,
Parliament is irrelevant.
Parliament is irrelevant.
Even all our discussions are irrelevant.
But I continue to ask, why put such a huge figure out there? Or is it just basically, or are you saying it's just showing that things can be done as is wanted?
It's hidden in plain sight.
Without the proper documentation or explanation.
But who reads the appropriations bill? As Eric was saying,
That's a good question.
it's a voluminous document.
Yeah.
Who reads it to understand it and compare it with the Gazette notice that is issued every mid-month? Who? We do. And when we do...
Exactly, it's published.
Yes.
So it's available for people to read.
Yes.
You have 12 months, you can read through it.
Yes.
Okay. Many pieces of legislation are long-winded, full of legal jargon. People read. Judgments of the court, which form part of our laws, are long, wordy, verbose, and all, but people read. So even these things, people read, Jimmy.
The problem is people don't read.
Really?
I'm telling you, they do not read. They do not read numbers in relation to the laws of this land. Because those are two things. You read this in accordance with the laws of our land. For example, we're just talking about the procedure of the budget. How do you bring the cart before the horse? You're busy debating the finance bill. You've not seen the appropriations bill. You've not debated it. It has not gone to public participation. Why are you talking about revenue-raising measures of something you have not approved? If you read the law, it's clear what comes first. It is there. It is there in the Constitution. It is there in public finance management. It's there. It's even stipulated what comes first, the sequence. It's there. But who really gets down to looking at both?
So,
And if you look at both together, is when you see the criminality. And that's what we bother to do with our forensic audit.
is this in our history, Jimmy? Has this been happening since
No.
independence?
This happened with the new constitution,
Okay.
with the new Public Finance Management Act. And I can tell you, I don't know, maybe when Treasury began, they didn't understand, or they interpreted the laws to be different, or they were trying to follow what used to happen in the past. But if you want to know where our problems, when the rain started beating us, right, is when Treasury started breaking the law. And they started breaking it 10 years ago. And they still are at it.
Are you saying, Jimmy, that before the new constitution, what was passed as a budget, what was gazetted as the appropriations, was never tinkered with by the Treasury?
Yes. It was nowhere
In the
near.
Kibaki days.
It was no. Oh no. You cannot put malfeasance to the Kibaki days.
Nothing happened.
Even domestic borrowing had a leeway. It was not. Remember at the time it was not Public Finance Management Act, right?
Yes.
It was different financial controls, and they had leeway. But a lot of these laws were specifically embedded in our constitution and in public finance management because we needed accountability. Everybody felt that giving leeway to Treasury, to a president, to this and this, must now have an accountability process. And it starts this way. The law of how you process our public finance management, right, is embedded in the Constitution, Public Finance and Regulations. Controls. It is called controls. And you do not veer beyond controls. And that the sole responsibility at the end of it all is the president, who issues and signs the warrants that kick off the budget.
Yeah.
All right? Now, those are called controls. Treasury for the last 11 years has just done whatever it wants to do. Now, it's like your own place. The minute your accountant is just doing whatever he wants, is not abiding by controls, you have the biggest problem on earth. And this government, which was also in the previous one, this one is even more notorious. It is doing things you cannot imagine. You cannot imagine. How do you go and borrow 1.8 trillion shillings? How do you do it?
Against an approval.